Good morning, everybody. My name is Mary Collier. I'm the Professional Development Program Manager at the Ontario Museum Association, and I'd like to welcome you to Twitter 101 this morning. As an organization of provincial scope, the Ontario Museum Association recognizes that its members and community live and work on the lands and territories of Indigenous peoples. Toronto, where the OMA offices are located, is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. The territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. And the territory is also covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. So as you participate today, we invite you to reflect on the land that you're on, who the traditional keepers of the land are, and what the treaty relationship is, or if you're on unceded territory. And we wish to express our gratitude for the resources that we're using and pay respect to the rich and ongoing Indigenous history of what is now Ontario and Canada. So thank you for being here this morning from wherever you're joining us. So I am very pleased today to introduce our speaker, Laura Pearce. Laura is a strategic and innovative marketer with more than 18 years of experience in digital and multi-platform brand, product, and performance marketing. She's currently the head of marketing for Twitter in Canada, where she specializes in real-time content and conversation-based marketing, helping consumers and advertisers to get the most out of Twitter. So according to her Twitter bio, she is a career marketer and avid tweeter who loves books, TV, skiing, running, and tennis, if I've interpreted those emojis correctly. And she is, of course, a world-class shopper and mom. So thank you so much for being here today, Laura. We really appreciate you taking the time to share all of your knowledge with us. So I will pass it over to you to get started.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks for interpreting the emojis. You got it. All good bios have to have emojis. That's my vote. So I'm going to share my screen. As Mary said, if you want to put questions in, Mary, if there's a question that's really pertinent to the topic I'm talking about, then you can feel free to let me know and ask a question. If not, we can hold some for the end and then go from there. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. Okay, so as we know, this is Twitter 101 for the Ontario Museums, and I am Laura Pearce, as we just talked about. So as we just talked about, I'm the head of marketing for Twitter Canada. I know a lot about Twitter, but I'm sure you also know a lot about your own Twitter experience. So I invite you to kind of let me know how that's going, ask me specific questions about it as we get to the end, and I'm going to do my best to take you through a couple of the things. I did get some questions in advance, so I've tried to do my best to answer those. So I think the most important thing that I help you understand today is Twitter is what's happening in the world and what people are talking about right now. And people use Twitter every day to see and discuss what's going on in the world across all of their interests and passions. And it's actually the #1 reason that people come to Twitter. So when you think about the difference between what Facebook is, what Instagram is, and what Twitter is, the really important distinction is Twitter is very steeped in the moment, and it's about news, and entertainment and sports and events that are happening in the moment. So sometimes that's about Black Lives Matter. Sometimes it's just about funny tweets around what we're going through right now in the pandemic. You know, it's about entertainment with Dan Levy taking home a number of awards, as well as Catherine O'Hara. Over the weekend, unless you lived under a rock, it was me on Irish Twitter waiting on British Twitter to wake up and answer American Twitter. Everybody knows what the reference there is. If you didn't watch it, go on Twitter. You'll hear everything about it. And then some fun around what the royal family was doing. So that's just a flavor of what can be happening at any moment on Twitter across all of the different sections. And as we talked about, it is actually the #1 reason people come to Twitter is to see and talk about what's happening. So why is that important to you? Well, it's important to you because you need to think about that when you're using Twitter. So one of the big questions in the questions I received is, how should I do things differently from Facebook and Instagram? We're going to talk about that, but you need to enter Twitter with the mindset that you're going into a place where people are talking about current events, cultural moments, the last TV show they watched, the pandemic, and and you need to kind of understand the context into which you're going. Whereas Facebook, because it's more closed, it has, you know, a set group of people that are seeing it, that have opted in to see what you're publishing. There's a very different dynamic. The best thing about Twitter is that it's real time. So this is a very fun tweet. We laugh about this all the time at Twitter. One of the things we say often is Facebook's going to be really mad when they find out on Monday, because things happen in the moment on Twitter and it takes the other platforms a little bit to catch up. That doesn't always impact you because sometimes what you're doing doesn't need to be in the moment, but when you do need to respond to cultural moments, Twitter is a place to do that. And the most important thing we say to people trying to work on Twitter is it's important to remember that that a lot of platforms are a look at me platform. And we don't say that to be critical. There's a role for all of the different platforms, but Facebook and Instagram are more about selfies and what I'm eating, what vacation I'm on, you know, how I'm feeling about a particular thing that's going on, but not as timely. It's really about me. And then you're friends with me, so I tell you about me and you're interested. Twitter is a look at this platform. So it is an outward looking platform. So when you show up on Twitter with the same things that you're posting on Facebook and Instagram, it can be disappointing because you may not get the engagement and the interaction that you're looking for, because people are going on Twitter to find out a bigger picture about the Golden Globes, about the upcoming Grammys, about Dan Levy, or about what they watched last night on Oprah. And when you post in there or tweet and it doesn't connect to those things, it can sometimes fall flat until you develop a very sort of robust follower base. So it's super important to think about the cultural context and take content from Facebook and Instagram. It doesn't mean you can't reuse it, but how could you connect it differently to the conversation? So you should be going on and looking, what's trending? What are people talking about? What's the mood on Twitter? And how do I play into that? It doesn't mean you can never just tell people, you know, we've got an exhibit opening or this is happening at the museum. But in order to really build your follower base and get more engagement, you're going to have to branch out from the more informational stuff that you're doing and do a bit more connecting to culture. So let's have a look. This woman, Amanda Gutz, she used to be the head of a wedding publication. Now she's an entrepreneur. And she did this really great thread on kind of her thoughts about Twitter and how she's using it. And I actually find it really helpful for people. So 10 observations from 10 months on Twitter. She says it's not a how-to because she didn't approach Twitter with a goal of hitting lots of followers, but you know, she focused on share her thoughts, push her thinking. And I think that's an important aspect of, if you go on with the only goal of gaining followers, then you'd be better off to just run a follower campaign, spend a bit of money and drive those followers. If you want to go on and have conversations, then you need to engage in those conversations. So first of all, she says, I used to think that no one cares what I have to say, but now I realize it's not about me. So back to the first point, it's about relating to each other. So think of that when you're going on. It's not always about what's happening specifically at the museum. It's how that might connect with what other people are doing in the moment. And a lot of the people that you're speaking to are interested in arts and what you have going on at your museum, but how are you connecting with them around that? Getting started was the hardest part. In the beginning, my tweets got minimal likes and I felt like junior high cafeteria. Everyone already had their friends group. So some of you may feel that way, and that's normal. And, you know, there's progress there that you can make. You can't get better at something you don't do. This is a big thing, is that if you only ever tweet, you know, once a month when you have something new that you want to announce, it's very likely that you won't get a lot of engagement because you need to be a little bit more regular. That doesn't mean you have to tweet multiple times a day, but you should have a general regular cadence that you feel comfortable with based on the resources that you have, and you should try to keep that up so that it isn't just sort of one-offs. And I'll give you an example of a really big grocery chain, who I won't name, who, you know, posts recipes and food inspiration on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, they are only tweeting about recalls or store closures. And then they come and they say, you know, we're not sure why we're not getting a lot of Twitter engagement or why our Twitter engagement is negative. And our advice to them was you need to take that recipe content, that stuff that's more fun on Instagram and Facebook, and need to move it into Twitter in a way that works for Twitter. So if someone's looking for a particular thing or says they love avocados, then reply with an avocado recipe. So use that content, but use it in a way that's conversational. But make sure that you're not using Twitter as exclusively just information, because it's not engaging for people. Tweet about what you're passionate about and what attracts people from our similar passions. So you're obviously passionate about your museums and art and history, but what are the other passions that you might share with people who might frequent your museum? Can you think a little bit beyond that core thing? What else might they be interested in, and try to connect to those moments? Be succinct, send tweet. So don't try to do everything in a tweet. A tweet is capped at character length for a reason. Use images, use GIFs, use threads if you have a lot to say, but try not to sort of say everything and then put a URL at the bottom, because people don't know what you're asking them to do and they don't know how to engage with it. One viral tweet may get you followers, but consistent content makes you worth following. So that's back to just the consistency. This is just a general tweet others how you want to be treated. So I'm sure you are aware that sometimes people feel more free to be critical on a platform like Twitter. So if we always channel that positivity, we hope to get that positivity back. And then this is more of a personal thing around just supporting women. And I would say museums support museums, talk to each other, help each other, like each other's tweets, retweet each other's tweets, you know, create a community of people that are interested in all the things that you're doing, not just your own museum. And then this is a more personal piece from a mental health perspective. She feels that Twitter is better for her. I think this is back to the look at me versus look at that. And, you know, how can you have conversations that are bigger than just kind of what I'm doing or what's happening with me? And that's a little bit more personal, but I think worth mentioning. So really what I'm saying in all this is Twitter is where you build cultural relevance. So it can be informational, but it's also where you connect to what else is going on in the world and remind people why you have an important role in the conversations and in the conversations they're having and the activities they're doing. So let's have a look at what are people talking about on Twitter, because it's hard to enter a place when you don't have context. So this is data from last week. This looks at the top 6 conversations on Twitter. You won't be surprised to see that politics is the #1 conversation, but I'd remind you that a lot of the politics conversation is also, like right now, health conversation. And, you know, what is Ottawa Public Health doing? What's Ontario Public Health doing? What is Toronto Public Health doing? So that gets wrapped into that. But I wouldn't worry about that. You don't have to, I mean, obviously you're not going to go in and talk about politics, and there are so many other conversations that are going on Twitter. You're thinking like billions of tweets every day. So don't get too hung up on it's about politics. I don't belong to that, so I can't have conversation. Because the second biggest is entertainment. The third is music. Fourth is gaming. Obviously, people are talking about COVID, and there was a time when COVID was in the #2 spot. We've seen it come down, obviously, as we've gotten a little bit more used to what's going on, and hopefully are making some progress in terms of coming out of this. And then sports is always a really big conversation. And week to week, this oscillates. So music might pop up, COVID might grow because vaccination sites are opening. Gaming could be really big on a given week because of a certain tournament. So they oscillate, but these tend to be sort of the top conversations. Then more recently, we've done a study looking at 2 years worth of tweets to really identify 6 key conversation trends we think will extend into 2021. And the one that I felt was most important to this group is what we're calling creator culture. I'm sure you've heard it and talked about it. And this is more making in the hands of many. And this is sort of this blurring the lines between work and play, and this new entrepreneur, a creator person emerging. But so inside of this trend, there are a number of what we call sub-trends. And these are ways that you can think about, well, where is that community? What are they talking about? How might I connect with them? Why is it important to me? So I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So inside of this, there is what we call the career creator. And these are professional creators. They want to be one. They're driving conversation. It's about entrepreneurialism. And you can see that we've seen a big growth in conversation as entrepreneurialism becomes more prominent. This tweet, I'm over the moon. I've sold my first piece of art. I feel honored, flattered, and inspired to do more. I'm an official working artist. So, you know, these are people on the platform that you probably want to tap into because they have an interest in art and how that art gets made. So these are important conversations to think about. You've got a big growth in conversation around sponsorship platforms. So how do these artists get their work out there? We have a huge hashtag that we've even given a custom emoji around Portfolio Day for people to show their own art to get exposure. So while that's not necessarily, you might be thinking, yeah, but we're a museum, that's not what we're doing. But these are people that you might attract to your museums that are talking about things in this area. So it doesn't have to be a perfect match, but just tangentially, if you were at a cocktail party with these people, what might you talk about? The next is aspiring makers. So, you know, writing, cooking, making, focus on creativity. This tweet had hundreds of thousands of likes. My embroidery take on Monet's Japanese bridge. So just an appreciation of art and how they're creating it in their homes. We've seen a big growth in conversation around creativity outside of in the home, given this is where we're all stuck. Conversation around new creative hobbies and nostalgic crafts. So again, it's not the exact conversation that you're looking for, but these are people that from a psychographic point of view, you would probably be interested in engaging. So what does that look like? And then one of the questions that was sent to me was, well, what are important hashtags? Well, inside of this conversation, these are a number of hashtags, and you will get these materials as a PDF after, so you don't feel like you have to start to take screenshots or write it down, but just in terms of creativity, aspiring makers, and then conversational entertainment is a little bit separate, which I didn't show you, but here's Portfolio Day here, artist on Twitter, indie dev, pixel art, drawing, poetry, illustration, photography. So all conversations that you may want to tap into as you talk about what you're doing. So let's talk about, you know, that's great, Laura, you work at Twitter, you have all this data, so you know what's going on, but how am I supposed to know what's going on? So I wanted to make sure that we give you a few tools and tips for you to stay up to date and not make it overwhelming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to do that. So the number one place that you can see what's going on, and I would suggest that anytime you're going to be tweeting on Twitter, you should be checking the trends and what people are talking about before you're doing that, just so you don't make a misstep or kind of come into a conversation in a funny way. So this is called the Explore tab. It's the little magnifying glass on the bottom of your app. I always call it Twitter for Dummies, which I don't mean in a derogatory way. It's just, if all else fails, you don't have a really developed follow graph, you don't necessarily know if you're following the right people, and you don't know what's happening, you should go to the Explore tab and it will tell you what's happening. So yesterday we saw the cast of Kim's Convenience look back on the show because they announced that they were ending the show to a lot of dismay. Obviously, lots of conversation about Oprah and how that conversation went on Sunday night. So this is a really great place. You can set your region, so you can see trends in certain regions. You can see them across Ontario, you can see them across Canada, you can see them in like Toronto, Ottawa. So this is a way for you to customize and understand what's happening a little bit more locally as well, but it's a really easy and smart place for you to go all the time when you're going on Twitter. And you can search hashtags and people of interest from there. Topics is a newer feature that you may not know about. If you go onto let me just open it so I get it right, but if you go onto your your Twitter and then you look at where you see your profile, you'll see profile, list, topics, bookmarks, moments. Topics is on that list. You can click into it. And when you click into it, this is what you will see. You can find topics to follow, so you can search topics, but it will also give you a list of topics. And you can see here that the second topic is arts and culture. So then I have gone down inside of that. So I can follow art, and it gives me a couple of other options: photography, astrophotography, wildlife photography, visual arts. So then I said, okay, I'll follow a visual arts and I'll dig deeper into that. And then you can see concept art, drawing and illustration, graphic design, painting, sculpting, street art. So I would suggest going in and following some of the topics that are most important to you and your organization or your museum, and also maybe topics that you think your patrons might care about. And then what happens when you do that is that the topics that you follow inject tweets into your home timeline from that topic. So I'm going to just show you a quick video to show you how that works. Oh, and I realize you probably can't hear the sound because I've got my headphones in, but there's no speaking, it's just music. So I'll just let it go. Okay, so really important there. You will see tweets even from people you don't follow. So one of the big barriers sometimes to people on Twitter is that they don't know who to follow. So then they don't see tweets and they don't know what's happening. So Explore tab will help with that, but also following topics will inject tweets into your timeline that you might not otherwise see. And then you can decide whether you follow that account, which can help you also develop your follow graph. So what I've done here, and if all of you have your cameras, I have produced some QR codes so that you can quickly follow a couple of these topics. And then I would encourage you to go in and look at the other topics. But if you want to take a second now and scan this QR code, it will add this to your Twitter profile. If you don't want to do that now and you want to do it later, that's fine. Or if this isn't the right topic for you, that's okay too. I'll give it a couple seconds and then I'll go to the next one. Okay, so if you haven't had time, again, this material will come out after. I did sculpting. This may or may not be of interest to you, totally up to you. This QR code will lead you there. And then what will happen is once you start following topics, it will recommend topics that are related for you to follow. So it'll sort of, you might also like, so the algorithm obviously starts to understand what you're following and then suggests other things. So I expect now that I'm following these things, I'll get more of this in my timeline. So I'll leave that for a second. It always feels like longer when I'm waiting. So if I rush you, I'm sorry. And if we're sitting here looking at each other, I'm sorry about that too. And then the last one, a little bit of a different take is you can also just follow topics on your own Twitter account that are of interest to you, or if you feel like you are in a particular area where people might be interested in something tangential that you think you should follow, then by all means, follow these topics. This is entertainment. This is totally up to you. And actually this screenshot obviously was taken a little while ago, so that's an older story. But that's entertainment if you're interested, and you can put it on your own personal timeline, or if it makes sense to you, put it in with your museum account. The other thing that's really helpful, and that I do a lot, we do a lot at Twitter, is creating lists. So lists are groups of accounts that go together, and what it does is allows you to see tweets from all of the people on that list without directly following them on your timeline. So someone like me, there are moments in time when I have to follow, like I have an NHL Twitter list, but I only need to follow that at certain moments in time, or maybe I'm following it really exclusively in the playoffs, but I don't want it in my regular timeline. So I have a list for that. I have a list for Bell Let's Talk Day because it's one of the biggest days on Twitter every year, but I don't necessarily need to follow all those people every day, so I just use it for that day. So you may choose for Museums Month to have specific lists, but you also might choose to have lists of people that might engage with your account. So you might choose to have a list of other museums so you can see what they're doing. You might choose to have a list of maybe local people that have supported, be patrons of your museum or your board, or artists that you think are important to the work that you're talking about. So these are very personal. You can make a list private, so only you can see it, or you can make it public so other people can follow it. I started this list, Museums of Ontario. I am sure that I don't have everything here, and I'm sure you guys are a lot more knowledgeable. So this might be something that Museums Ontario wanted to create as a master list and allow all of the other groups access to it. But this is how it looks. So when you create the list, it tells you who created it. It gives you all the members, it gives you how many members. So obviously I only have 26, so that's clearly not everybody, but I just wanted to get it started. And then what happens is, this is my home timeline, and you can see if I pin this list to my timeline, then I can scroll over and only see a timeline from the museums that I've put on that list. And what happens when I do that is it looks like this. So it is really handy because you can scroll over and see different timelines based on the lists of people that you've decided to follow. So I do encourage everybody to think about lists in your own work that would be meaningful for you, accounts that you need to keep track of, etc. I also use alerts for certain big moments. So the Grammys is on Sunday. I will have alerts on The Weeknd and Shawn Mendes and Alessia Cara and some other people, just to kind of see if they're tweeting. So if there's a big moment that's happening, or you're having a big exhibition and you want to see if somebody that's important to your community is tweeting about it, you can put alerts on for them. I just wouldn't recommend having alerts on all the time for a lot of people, because it can be really overwhelming in your feed and on your phone, because it's buzzing all the time. So here's kind of what happens with the list. So you go in here, you click here and you create the list. This is not going to be customized to museums, but you get the idea. And this is how you pin lists. So now you can see that this is Sunday Suppers. It's been pinned to the home timeline. And then when you scroll over, you can see all the lists that have been pinned and those timelines. So this is really functional and helpful for people who are managing accounts. So this is a high recommend from me. Again, I've started this list. It's by no means complete. I think I should probably pass it to Mary and team to create, but there's a QR code here for it if you want to have a look. And maybe I could pass it over to Mary and team, and then you guys can decide, can add all of the appropriate people and accounts that need to be here. The other thing that you should do with your Twitter feed is follow people outside of your area, or follow people and accounts that are talking about the things that might be tangential interests. So one of the things we did at Twitter was we created this diversify your feed list, and it's a list of powerful Black Canadian voices. Just to say, you may not be following these people in your daily lives, and that may, cause you not to see some of the topics and things that they're talking about. So if you follow this list, and you can pin it to your timeline. So if anybody's interested in that, either personally or in your work, there's a QR code that will give that to you. And we have well over 4,000 followers of this list now. So this has been a good strategy. So you may also choose to create a list for the patrons or the followers of your account and invite them to follow it as a resource from the museum, like we've done at Twitter Canada. So I'll give this a minute and let you see if you'd like to follow this, and I'll have a little sip of my tea. So that's topics and lists, very functional, very useful. It makes things a lot easier to not hunting around trying to think of accounts that you need to follow. If there are questions on that, pop them into the chat. If not, I'm going to move on to another topic. Okay, here we go. So you guys are no doubt familiar with Instagram stories. We have recently launched fleets on Twitter, which are essentially the stories that we have on Twitter. They offer more creativity and expression. It will give you an opportunity to repurpose content if you are currently creating Instagram stories. It's a very multimedia format, as you may know from Instagram stories. It removes the barrier to tweeting a little bit because these do not have public likes or engagement metrics. But you personally, if you're the owner of the fleet, you can see how many people have seen your fleet. And what happens with the fleets is they sit at the top of the timeline in the little avatar circles, and you can see all the people that have fleeted, and you can scroll through them. And then the method of engagement with them is direct messages. So it's a new way to engage with your community. Here's a couple of examples. This is Amber Mack, who's a very prominent tech reporter, but kind of relevant to you, just saying like, here's what's happening with me this week if you want to tune into anything. So that might be a good way for you to let people know what's going on at your museum in a more visual way that is a little bit lower barrier to entry in terms of having people respond. This is Twitter Women putting out kind of an important inspirational message yesterday for International Women's Day around how we feel about the day and how we're supporting women. So you can use it to announce a new exhibit and showcase some of the art from it. You can use it to just sort of connect with an important cultural moment, like Portfolio Day. You might show your own, portfolio in a fleet for Portfolio Day with the hashtag. So this is just a different way. And then you, again, may use content that you might be using on Instagram here, which will give you a little bit of efficiency. The other thing someone asked, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We did actually get a question about fleets.
Okay.
Why are they called fleets? And can you just explain again sort of what exactly they are?
Sure. So they're called fleets because they're fleeting. They expire after 24 hours. So that's why they lower the barrier to tweeting. And we've seen that we are seeing people who don't traditionally tweet are willing to fleet because they're just a little less permanent. But from a more functional perspective, they're multimedia formats. When you go to create a fleet, so basically you click on your own avatar. Your avatar is your profile photo. It will say create a fleet. And what happens is it will go to your photo library to ask you to create a fleet. So a fleet has to have some kind of media, a video or a photo. You can fleet a tweet, which is not a nursery rhyme. So if you had a tweet about new exhibitions starting and you wanted to get more exposure on that, or you wanted to make it more visually interesting, you can fleet it, and then people can click on that tweet in the fleet and go to the tweet, and you can tweet a fleet. So you can also take a fleet and put it into a tweet. So you can cross-pollinate those two. Essentially, they're just really high multimedia, and they sit at the very top of everybody's timeline if they're following you. So they're quite visible. Hopefully that helps. If there are any other questions, let me know.
Great, thank you.
Okay. We did get a question about how do you handle trolls? This is one way, but I think this has other applications. So we have created what we're calling conversation settings. And this says for ads, but it's also on organic tweets. And so you can have a private conversation in public. So you get visibility, but no interruptions. You can control the narrative. So you can interact with people you choose, and you can, host conversations. So in this example, we say, hey, NASA, are you up? And you can see that the reply button is grayed out. And that's because we have chosen in the settings to only have people who are tagged. So anybody whose @handle we put in can reply. So then NASA can reply, hey, Twitter, what's up? And Twitter's tweeting from Earth, what's up from you? And in fact, this was when they were, up in the space shuttle. So they were tweeting back at us, and it was a fun execution. So let's imagine it's the start of Museum Month and you wanted to have a conversation with you know, 3 other museums that are in your area that are participating in some fun exhibits. You might tweet at them, set the conversation settings so that only they can reply. You could have a little conversation. You could fleet that conversation. You can get out the information you want without detractors. If you are getting detractors, I hope you're not getting too many, because it's hard to detract from from what you're doing, but it may happen. This is an example we did in Canada for International Day of the Girl. So we said at Plan Canada, can we chat? Tell us about what you do. So, you know, Museums Ontario main account could reach out to some of the key museum accounts and ask them what they're doing for Museum Month. You could engage an influencer in your particular area. It might be an artist, it might be an MPP, it might be a patron of the museum, and get them talking about what's going on. So this is a way to control the conversation, but also to just create some dialogue without worrying about who else might reply. And then you can pin that conversation to the top of your timeline so that people can see it. So we did one with TIFF on the Thursday of TIFF. We said, hey, TIFF, anything going on this weekend? And they told us all about what was happening for TIFF, TIFF at home. So this is a fun thing that you can experiment with among the museums or among people that are important to you in the museum community. So those are just some ways that you can re-engage. So I think I want to talk a little bit about kind of key things that you're doing on Twitter. I want to talk a little bit about your profile. Those of you who have good Twitter experience, you can get a smile and say, yes, I know Laura, but for some of you who might not be doing this, it's helpful. So a profile is really important on Twitter because Twitter is totally public. People do want to know exactly who they're following and what they're going to be tweeting about. So it's important to have more than just my name and then a reiteration of your name in your profile. So it's important to tell people what to expect from your account. So describe what you do, maybe your values, tell your followers what to expect from following you. So, tweets about the museum, exciting exhibits, what's going on in the world of art, whatever you choose. And then make sure you put the link to your museum in the bio so that people can click to it. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Here's my profile. You probably heard about it when Mary was trying to interpret the emojis. So I'm a career marketer and avid tweeter. That kind of is a warning. I tweet a lot. If it bugs you, you might choose to put me on a list and not in your main timeline. Occupational hazard. Things that I tweet about, books and skiing and running and being a woman and tennis. I love shopping, so you'll see that. I'm a mom, so you might see stuff about my kids, and I work at Twitter Canada. So as an individual, it's important to identify sometimes where you work if that influences how you tweet, which in my case, of course, it does. Here's the Art Gallery of Ontario. I'm sure lots of you have great profiles, but this is a good profile because it tells you a little bit about them. It says, great art whenever, wherever, so how they're kind of delivering that to you, and then it has their link to their website. This is the Ariana Huffington. I'm sure you know who she is. She does a good job of mixing both personal and professional here. So she's a mother sister, but she's also the founder of HuffPost and the founder of this Thrive Global, whose mission is to end stress and burnout. And she puts the website. So she's clear kind of where she comes from personally and then what to expect from her professionally. And then this is the Toronto History Museums account, 10 historic museums operated by the City of Toronto, working collectively to inspire passion for TO history. There's some terms of use. I don't know if that's important there, but it may be, so that's a decision. And then using a hashtag, tell the full story. If that's a hashtag that you're really attached to, it's important for you to use it in your own tweets. It's good to put it in your bio so people understand that that's connected to you. So those are a few examples. I'm sure there are lots more, but just think about making sure that your bio is more descriptive than just your name. A lot of you already know this. This is from the Museum of Nature, but this is just the basic anatomy of the tweet. You've got replies, retweets, and likes, which I'm sure you all know about. And then the username, this is when you use hashtags, this is how they appear. Certain hashtags will have custom emojis. And what we know internally about custom emojis is that people use hashtags with custom emojis more than others. So for big important dates like International Women's Day, there's a custom emoji. It does help drive usage of that hashtag and drive engagement on your tweet when you use it. So that's just something to know. What and how you should tweet. We're Twitter, so everything's stripped down to the basics, but this is really just tweet simple. So lead line, what you want people to think. Here's your link and hashtag. What do you want them to do? And then maybe an image or a video or a GIF around what you want them to feel. Try not to pack too many things into a tweet. They're tweets for a reason. They need to be short and succinct and help people kind of just get a gist. If you need to do multiple, you can do a thread. And so then these are some copy best practices. So as we talked about, keep it brief. It's our mantra. You know that expression, I would have written a shorter email, but I didn't have time. Well, apply it to your tweets. I would have written a shorter tweet, but I didn't have time. So really sweat how much copy you need to put in there. Connect your content in your copy. So make sure there's a connection, like why is this image there? Make sure it connects to what you're saying. Focus your message. As we talked about, don't try to tell people 7 things. It's too much and they won't hear any of it. And then use hashtags, but don't overuse hashtags. So that's important. And if you have a hashtag that you're using consistently, then you should use it consistently in your tweets. I'm going to go through that. I'm just going to give you a quick look at this, but there are some do's and don'ts around hashtags. The number one thing is, like, if you make up a hashtag and expect it to be viral the next day, you're going to be disappointed. Even at Twitter, our rule is that we do not make up hashtags. So we will automatically gravitate to the hashtag that is the biggest hashtag of that moment. We don't create campaigns that have their own hashtags that don't connect to another cultural moment. Now that's a Twitter thing because we're Twitter and we're what people are talking about, but think about that. How realistic. So if you want to create a hashtag for your museum or an exhibit, use it for like a length of time. It can't just be sort of a one day or one moment thing. And then reward people when they use it. So reply to them, like their tweet, retweet them. And then if you do have VITs, very important tweeters in your community, you should make sure that they know that that's a hashtag you want them using. Don't over hashtag your content. This happens a lot on Instagram. Doesn't work on Twitter, so don't do it. I would 1 or 2 max. Don't go like the lines of 15 hashtags. Expect people to use a hashtag for no reason. You need to educate consumers on what it is, and don't use caps unless it's an acronym. You should use title case, and title case is better for anyone with any like reading disabilities because they can see how the words divide up. General best practices, and these are not museum examples, and I kind of did that deliberately. You know, when things are happening in culture, you should reply and engage with other accounts. You should engage with accounts that have more followers than you and follow them because maybe they'll follow you back, and then your tweets will be in their timeline when they like them. So think about who you want to engage with and go out actively and follow them. And that applies to people too. If you have somebody who's replying to you as a museum patron, you should follow them or engage with them in some way so they know you saw, and then they'll be more engaged with your tweets. So have a plan on how you're going to follow other people so that they will follow you back, people, accounts, organizations. So this is a fun one. Tim Hortons did a toast me instead of a roast me day, and here's No Name replying, just basically kind of riding off the trend that Tim Hortons was creating. You can use polls. Obviously, many of you know about polls, but this is obviously Wendy's around Korean barbecue cheeseburger, which might make you hungry, but and driving people to vote and give you feedback. It's great because it's interactive, and it's also great because then the people who engage with your poll will see the results. You should jump onto meme culture. So one of the memes that I think might be particularly interesting for the museum community, especially those around historic museums, is How It Started, How It's Going meme, which has been frankly going for a really long time. This is the White House using it when they used to meet in person and now they're meeting over video, but this How It Started, How It's Going is literally everywhere. And you probably have a really great opportunity with the history that you have in your museums to show these types of things. This is the Blue Jays. This is Valentine's Day. So I know you're a museum, but it doesn't hurt to jump into cultural moments or key dates. So this is just the Blue Jays, you know, doing something fun for Valentine's Day. And you'll be surprised that you will get tweets. So you might remember back a while ago when we legalized cannabis, the ROM did a huge thread of all the photos of pots that they had in the museum, which got a lot of attention, even though a museum is not usually in the conversation around legalization of cannabis, but that was very creative. And then the AGO did this fun thing with the Met Gala where they compared stars like Celine Dion to different rocks and minerals. So I do invite you to think outside of the box around what are conversations that are happening in culture that you could be a part of, and also watch for memes, because it's fun when you participate in a meme, even if it's not an update about what's happening at the museum, it will get put into the bigger conversation, and it will probably get you some followers and at least some people who are like, hey, they're really tuned in and they'll like it. So, and then the next one is really a bit of an eye chart. Again, you will get this after, but there are 8 million days of the year. There's a cultural day for every day. It's kind of overwhelming, but this just has a look at, like, this weekend's the Grammy Awards. Then we have Daylight Savings Time, the Ides of March, St. Patrick's Day, the International Day of Happiness, you know, World Poetry Day, World Water Day. So are there ways that you, from a museum perspective, can connect with this? Earth Hour. So not all of them are going to work for you. And I don't, you know, maybe National Virtual Vacation Day, you can probably see you got WestJet and Air Canada and different airlines doing that, and you're not going to do that. But there might be days in this calendar that you could connect with around what's going on in the world. So I do encourage you to go on the internet and look up dates and see what's happening, literally, and see how you might connect with those things and kind of join a larger conversation to start to expand your follower base. So that is my full presentation. I did want to leave time for comments. So I'll just say thank you for listening. I know it's a lot to listen to, so I appreciate it. My handle is L Pearce. If you want to ask me other questions or follow me, I'd be happy to have you. And then I will turn it to Mary and to you to ask any follow-up questions or things that you don't think I answered from some of the questions you put in the pre-survey.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Laura. We did have one question come in just about fleets. Just a question of whether you can save a fleet to your profile, or does it just disappear?
No, you can't. You can tweet the fleet, so then that makes it more permanent, but the fleet will be gone in 24 hours. So if you want to save them, you could tweet them out. And then you could pin that tweet to your profile.
Okay, great. So we have a question about Twitter moments, and I think this might be something that you're going to talk about next week.
Yes, I am. Yes, but go ahead.
So stay tuned next week. But in the meantime, what do you have any tips on creating Twitter moments, and what kind of content works?
Yeah, so moments are great because they are essentially a collection of tweets about a single topic. You get a cover page. So it's like a little mini website on Twitter, essentially. So you get a cover page, and then you can fill it with tweets from your museum or from people visiting your museum. So it allows you, so say you had an exhibit starting, you could do a moment with tweets from your own museum about what to expect at the exhibit, and that comes as a collection, and then you can tweet that moment out and let people know to check out the moment for everything that they're going to see. Or you might pull in some tweets from people who've actually taken part in your exhibit and thought it was amazing, so you pull those tweets in. So moments are really helpful for when you have more to say than just in a single tweet, or you want to highlight the fact that people are talking about something that you're doing. So for Museum Month, you might like to have an ongoing moment where you're just pulling in important tweets about what's going on in the month and how people can engage with it. So those are some great reasons. But I'll go into next week like a little tutorial about how to create a moment. And so hopefully that will be helpful for people.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question from Roxanne about, in post-COVID, what do you think the impact of Twitter and social media will have on cultural organizations?
So I think one of the things that we've seen be a remarkable change, obviously, is that people have been physically distanced. And so the way to connect has been through social channels and online. And Twitter, we've talked a lot about internally, has become kind of the world's largest living room. So we're all watching the Oprah interview together on Twitter. And also the world's largest sports stadium, or the roar of the crowd for sports, because it helps you understand what people are saying. You're not just watching the game, you can get a sense of what people are saying. But it's also been a place where we've probably not lived in too many moments where, like, literally getting public health updates at the beginning of this pandemic. All of the things that when's the vaccine site going to open up? How do I get on the wait list? What do I do? So all of those things, that's changed how we see social, and social has had more of a utility. So I think we will see that continue. I think we'll see people feeling empowered on how to do things more virtually and how to participate in maybe more things than they might have done in person. But I also think we're going to see, a real, my God, we can get out of our house and go do things. And I think there'd be a really big moment for museums to capitalize on, do some of the things that you were missing while you were at home, and come and see us and experience art and culture and history and science and a number of other things that you're specializing in. So I think the reliance on social will not go away, but I do think we're going to see people really rejoicing to get out of their house. I know I, for one, have got my own list of things I want to do when I get out of my house. So I think those are going to be big cultural shifts.
Great, thank you. Well, I certainly hope it does continue. Before we have a couple minutes left, I have one question that came in beforehand. It was just kind of a nuts and bolts question of, what is a blue check mark and how important is it for a museum to have one?
Yeah, this is a very hot topic. So a blue check mark essentially says you are who you say you are, and you've been verified with your identity. So blue check marks have been controversial because blue check marks are not meant to be endorsement of content. In fact, they are deliberately not endorsement of content. So what we are saying is that you, the person that is running this account and the content that's coming from this account, is connected legitimately to your account. So if your museum has a blue check mark, it's because we've verified that you are in fact that museum, and so that other accounts can't pretend to be your museum or give information about your museum that people might misunderstand as official information. And so that's why public figures have them. That's why even entertainment figures have them, because a lot of people try to impersonate them, and we want to be clear who you're talking to. It is important to have it to verify that you're the official source for information. It can algorithmically give you some advantages in terms of when people search against a museum or a certain topic, when you come up as a blue check mark, people are like, okay, that's the place I need to go. So it does help from that perspective. And we are revamping our verification process to be even more focused on identity, but we're also focused on, we're not going to verify people who aren't regularly tweeting, because what we don't want to do is push the public towards an account and then that account doesn't engage or respond or give people information. So those are going to be some new criteria, but currently criteria also includes you need to have a profile photo, you need to have tweet history, you need to have a certain following, and you need to have had some articles published about you so that we can verify that you are actually who you say you are, and that you are, a part of sort of a larger conversation. So those are some of the goals. And certainly from an Ontario Museums perspective, I think the most efficient thing would be for the association to come to us with like a batch of museums and ask for us to review them for verification versus a one-off, because it's a pretty cumbersome process. So that would be something I'd recommend.
Okay, well, thank you for that tip. We'll put that on our list of things to do, and certainly I think this is, as an association, probably given us a lot to think about in terms of how we're using Twitter for ourselves and for the benefit of our members. So yeah, thank you, Laura, for providing this kind of overview of sort of the basics of Twitter for everybody.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
And if obviously other questions come in, I'll be back next week for the 201. But if there are other things that you want just Mary for me to give you information on, then I can pass it to you and you can share. Actually, there's one thing that I did want to share, is that there was a question about demographics of Twitter. So I can send, that will be in the slides that I send around, and if people have questions on that, you can see it there as a comparison to Facebook.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I think that was definitely sort of one of the questions that came up beforehand, just in terms of differentiating between between platforms and how to use each one or to its strengths, I suppose. So really appreciate that. And so, as you mentioned, yes, you will be back next week for Twitter 201. So looking at moments and some other but more sort of detailed aspects of how to increase your engagement on Twitter. And I've actually just dropped the registration for that one in the chat in case anybody hasn't signed up yet and you're interested. So, but really a huge thank you, Laura, for taking the time to share with us today. Thank you, everybody who came out for your participation. I hope we'll see you back here next week.
And thanks to everyone putting thank you in the chat. That's very nice. I'm glad to get the feedback. It's always weird with virtual because you can't see anyone. You're like, I don't know. Does it matter? So thank you. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Well, I also wanted to mention some other sort of upcoming things with the OMA. We have our Indigenous Collections Symposium coming up on March 25th and 26th. And so that is going to be a really fantastic 2 days of connecting on all sorts of topics about caring for and sharing Indigenous collections. So I am also going to drop that registration link into the chat, and in case anybody wants to join us for that one. Yeah, just in general, as for all of our webinars recently, we've offered this free of charge as a service to the community during very challenging times for everybody as organizations and individuals. And if you're able, there are some things that you can do to help support the OMA to continue to provide timely and accessible resources. So if you are already a member, please renew your membership when you receive an email. If you're not a member, consider becoming one, either as an institution or an individual, and you can find information about that on our website, or consider making a donation to the OMA through our website or through Canada Helps. Your support of the OMA and your participation in events like this make us stronger as a sector, and we really appreciate every one of you. And we've got some information about the OMA's homepage, where you can find our COVID-19 resources, which is a dedicated webpage that we've been updating regularly with new resources as they become available. And so I think to wrap up, we just have a little bit of our contact information for everybody. So please do stay in touch, both with the OMA, and as Laura mentioned, I hope you get some new followers out of this, Laura, and feel free to tweet at Laura if you have other questions, as she mentioned. But thanks so much for your participation today, and I hope we'll see you next week.